My name is Catherine Vance, 29 years old. The text arrived at 2:47 p.m., a small white rectangle that cut through the grayscale of zoning maps like a blade. Sold your worthless building for $200,000. Family needs the money more than you. No question mark. No request. A verdict. My brother Marcus always preferred verdicts to conversations. I let the screen dim and turned back to the city plan. Parcel lines inked like capillaries. Corridors the commission hoped would carry a future we could pretend to predict. My pen hovered over a proposed mixed-use overlay. Someone cleared a throat. Ms. Vance? Your note on the stormwater easement? I support it, I said. My voice was steady, the trick I learned long ago. Move the chess piece you can move, not the one you wish you could. The meeting adjourned at 4:15. Polite handshakes, polite smiles, polite promises to circle back. Outside, late light peeled down the glass of Civic Plaza, and the wind tasted like steel and rain. I checked the phone again. 3 more texts from Marcus stacked beneath the first. Already deposited the check. Don't be mad. Firm needed the capital. Be grateful I got $200K for that dump. The Morrison building, that dump, had been appraised last quarter at $8.5 million. 3 profitable street-level businesses, 2 floors of premium office, 2 floors of luxury apartments, $142,000 of rent monthly, most of it automated, mercifully boring. To my family, I was still the one who had wasted her 20s, the quiet girl who managed other people's buildings, the one who never married a storybook husband or hung a framed degree in a conference room. They saw my 10-year-old Toyota and a 2-bedroom apartment and drew the graph they preferred, flatline. They didn't know the apartment was a penthouse I owned, mortgage-free, and that the quiet was camouflage. They didn't know about the 17 titles in my safe. I called Tom, my attorney. He answered on the second ring like he'd been expecting bad news from someone. What happened? My brother just sold one of my properties without my consent, I said. The Morrison. He claims he got $200,000. A silence with papers rustling inside it. That's fraud, Tom said finally. Forgery if he touched a deed. Grand theft at this valuation. How'd he execute it? That's what you're going to tell me, I said. Start the process. Buyer contact, title company, police if necessary. We do it by the book. Understood. I'll loop in the DA once I confirm the chain. Catherine. I'm on my way to my parents for Tuesday dinner, I said. If he's there, I'd rather say less until you verify more. The Vance house still smelled like pot roast and furniture polish, and those lemon kitchen wipes my mother bought in bulk. Marcus's BMW straddled 2 spaces like a flag. Victoria's husband's Tesla reflected the porch light in a smug, ceramic gleam. Inside, Dad was watching financial news with the volume up as if volume could translate to comprehension. Catherine, Mom called, apron tied too tight. You're just in time. Marcus told us the wonderful news. I set my purse on the entry table we weren't allowed to put keys on. Did he? About selling that old building. $200,000. Can you imagine? She laughed in a way that asked me to join. He says you've been trying to sell it for years. Isn't it a relief? I haven't listed it, I said softly. Where is he? In the dining room with your father and Victoria, celebrating. Marcus was in Dad's chair at the head of the table naturally. He'd poured Dad's good scotch into Dad's good glass, the kind he used only when people were watching. Victoria sat across from Trevor like a lifestyle magazine, their wrists light-catching, their smiles calibrated. Marcus stood when I stepped in, arms open like he'd just closed peace in the Middle East. There she is, he said, our favorite property manager. Don't worry about thanking me. Family helps family. Is that what this is? I drew out a chair and sat. It was my mother's chair, the one that always wobbled a little. Victoria leaned forward, eyebrows sloped into concern. Catherine, it's generous. That building's been doing nothing for years. Has it, I said, because sometimes an echo lets people hear themselves. Trevor cleared his throat. He's usually the first to notice an open elevator shaft in a conversation. I thought Catherine mentioned she... The important thing, Marcus said, lifting his glass, is I negotiated them up from $150,000. Johnson Properties wanted to lowball. You're welcome. Dad entered mid-speech and clapped Marcus on the shoulder. That's my boy. Natural negotiator. Mom drifted in behind him, flushed with the work of feeding people who never seemed to get full. Catherine, what will you do with the money? You could finally buy a real house, something with a yard. Marcus swirled amber and shrugged. I already deposited it. Firm needed liquidity. Silence. The kind that hums. The kind electricity makes when it's about to blow a fuse. You what? Victoria said, small. She hates being surprised. Into the firm account. Growth stage. Once we scale, I'll pay her back with interest. Dad nodded like a bobblehead on a dashboard. Smart to keep it in the family. Marcus, I said, walk me through how you executed the sale. He laughed. Never a good sound on him. Details. I'm a lawyer. I know how to handle real estate transactions. So you forged my signature, I said. Not a question. A temperature check. I didn't forge anything. His eyes flicked to Dad. I had power of attorney. No, I said, you didn't. Your father gave me POA for family properties years ago, he said to the room, which is not the same as saying it to me. Dad's jaw worked. That was for my properties, Marcus, not... The Morrison is mine, I said. My name on the deed. My taxes. My tenants. Marcus laughed again, but this time it snagged. Come on, Catherine, you manage it. That's different from owning. I purchased it in April 2019, I said. $2.3 million, cash. I let that sit, a stone in a shallow pool. Would you like to see the deed? Victoria inhaled, hand to her throat. $2 million? From where? From work, I said. The kind I do when I'm not being watched. Dad's bravado frayed. If this is some kind of bluff... My phone vibrated. I picked it up. Tom. Catherine, he said, brisk now, voice clipped by urgency. We have a mess. The sale ran through a title outfit called Quick Close Solutions. Their specialty is speed over scrutiny. Your brother presented a power of attorney and a copy of the deed. Both appear forged. The title company is already cooperating. The buyer is legitimate. Johnson Properties. They're furious and preparing to sue. The funds hit an account belonging to Marcus's firm this morning. I've initiated a freeze. Balance before deposit? I asked. He didn't hesitate. $47,000, insolvent without your money. I closed my eyes, not to hide, but to choose. Loop in the DA. Send me the doc copies. I'm at my parents'. He exhaled. One more thing. The Bar Association's ethics panel has been notified. When I returned to the dining room, nothing had moved except time. That was my attorney, I said. He's filed a police report. The title company is cooperating. Johnson Properties wants its $200,000 back in damages. They have screenshots. Marcus stood so fast the chair scraped the floor. You're bluffing. You've been bluffing your entire adult life, I said. It finally met a ledger. Mom pressed her apron to her mouth. Catherine, please, think about Marcus's career. I am, I said. I'm thinking about how much of my life you all were comfortable spending to protect it. Marcus's phone rang, and for once he didn't let it go to voicemail. He listened, color leaving him in strips. Yes, this is Marcus. No, she's my sister. Consent? He swallowed, eyes tearing in a way he would later call allergies. $8.5 million? He sat down like gravity remembered him. They're suing me, he whispered. They want it back. They want... Reality, I said. Dad tried the old authority one more time, voice raised as if volume could push the law back into a bottle. This family does not air its problems in public. We will fix this privately. With what? I asked. The firm is underwater. The check is frozen. The house is... I stopped, because I am not cruel. Please don't promise Marcus a lifeboat you can't build. No one spoke. Somewhere in the kitchen, the oven ticked as it cooled. The house smelled like rosemary and dread. Tom called again. I answered in the doorway. Yes? They're cooperating fully, he said, softer now, like he knew where I was standing. Quick Close is terrified of losing their license. The DA's office is assigning a prosecutor. Also, Johnson Properties Counsel just posted a statement. It's getting traction. How fast? I asked. Fast, he said. And Catherine, there's a hint in the notary log that your father may have, unknowingly perhaps, signed as a witness to something he didn't read months ago. It may not be criminal for him, but it muddies optics. I'll confirm before we draw conclusions. I looked back at the table. Marcus brittle, Mom pleading, Dad stiff, Victoria calculating which way the wind might save her hair. Confirm, I said. By the book. Always, Tom said. I ended the call and stepped fully into the room, the way you step onto a stage you never asked to stand on. The police will likely go to Marcus's house tonight, I said. The bar might suspend him pending investigation. Johnson Properties has already turned this into a cautionary tale. Victoria's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened. He's trending, she breathed, like weather. Marcus turned to me, boyish and breaking. Catherine, please. I thought I could fix it before you noticed. The firm, if I could just get to scale. You don't steal a foundation to finish a roof, I said. It collapses. In the quiet that followed, something else arrived. Not triumph, not fury. Clarity, maybe. The kind that doesn't need an audience. The doorbell rang. No one moved. I'll get it, Dad said, already rehearsing a speech about misunderstandings and family matters. He didn't know that speeches are only useful when facts consent to be moved. Footsteps, low voices, a practiced cadence. And then the officers stepped into the frame. Marcus Vance? Marcus closed his eyes. Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest. Marcus didn't argue when they cuffed him. He didn't look at the officers, or at Dad, or at the scotch he'd left sweating on the wood. He looked at me like a swimmer who has just realized the ocean is, in fact, the ocean. I'm your brother, he said, voice steady only because it had nowhere left to go. I nodded once, a mercy and a verdict. Mom made a sound that I'd only ever heard once before, at a funeral where the casket was too small. Dad followed the officers into the hall, speaking in that firm, genial register he used on bankers and umpires. He kept saying the same sentence with different punctuation. There must be some mistake. The door closed. The house exhaled. I could feel the pot roast cooling by degrees. No one moved until Victoria did. She stared at her phone, then angled it away from Marcus's empty chair as if it could bite her. It's everywhere, she whispered. Johnson Properties put up a thread, screenshots, timeline. They tagged the Bar Association. She swallowed. Real Estate Weekly picked it up, then Legal Times. Now there's local TV. Trevor looked at the headline, then at me, like he was adjusting to a new climate. Do you want me to, I don't know, drive you somewhere? It was the kindest wrong offer. I'm fine, I said. He nodded. He always had a quiet respect for facts once he recognized them. Dad came back in, cheeks bright with anger he couldn't place. We'll sort it out, he said to the room, to himself, to the legacy he'd curated like a hedge. He'll be home tonight. I'll make some calls. I let the sentence land and slide. Dad, I said gently, some events don't respond to calls. They respond to paperwork. He flinched, and I saw it, the flicker, the memory of a signature he hadn't fully read, a favor done to get a form out of the way. He smoothed his tie, though he wasn't wearing one. You don't know everything, Catherine. I don't want to, I said. I just want the truth to do what it does. Tom's email arrived with the document scans. I opened them at the end of the table while Mom wiped a spotless counter and Victoria dried a dry glass. The forged POA was almost elegant. The font matched. The notary stamp looked tired, but respectable. My name curved where it should have angled. The deed copy used an old address I'd changed 2 years ago. Sloppy excellence. The signature of a man who always believed someone else would clean up after him. I pinched to zoom on the notary log snippet Tom included. A familiar surname appeared in the witness column. Vance. Not my signature, not Mom's neat loops. The pen pressure was heavy, like someone writing harder to make it truer. A month-old date. A different strip mall notary than the one we'd used for Dad's last refinance. My stomach didn't drop. It refiled. Tom says the title company is cooperating, I told the room. They'll likely lose their license unless they help fix this. Johnson Properties wants their $200,000 immediately and damages. They're on offense. Victoria let out a breath that wasn't quite relief. So, they'll just take it from Marcus's account, right? The bank froze the funds, I said. But it won't cover the blast radius. The buyer's counsel wants penalties. The title company will try to shift liability. The DA will want a clean story. Nobody likes being the punchline on a Tuesday. Trevor rubbed his temples. And the bar? Ethics panel is opening a file, I said. Suspension is likely pending investigation. Dad folded his arms. We'll hire someone better than this, Tom, he said, as if excellence could be bought like better hors d'oeuvres. Someone who understands family. Tom understands the law, I said. It's the only language the situation speaks. Mom sank into a chair. She had stopped crying and started listing chores in a whisper, her old way of keeping panic busy. I should pack Marcus a bag. He hates the hospital blankets. Do jails have blankets? Mom, Victoria said softly, surprising us both. He can't take a bag. But his toothbrush. They have toothbrushes, I said. This will be fast and procedural. He'll be processed and Dad will post bail. Dad nodded, grateful for the one step he still recognized. Yes, bail, of course. I refinanced to help him get started. He cut himself off. Even his face knew the equity cupboard was bare. I stood to leave. I didn't feel triumphant or vindicated. I felt like a contractor walking a site that had failed inspection. Note the violations, fix the wiring, no speeches. In the kitchen, Mom touched my sleeve. He didn't mean harm, Catherine. He thought he could make it right before you. Before anyone noticed. Intent doesn't change the ledger, I said, then softened. He's terrified of failing. That's real. But fear doesn't become a permit. She nodded and nodded and nodded, emotion with no destination. Promise me you won't. I won't do anything theatrical, I said. We will do it by the book. By the time I reached my car, Tom had called again. Bail likely tonight, he said. 100,000 if the judge goes by the matrix. Your father might manage it. Also, Johnson's counsel wants to talk, not to negotiate yet, to signal they will pursue damages if the $200,000 isn't returned immediately. They'll get it back, I said. But that's not the number that matters. No, he agreed. They've already posted the $8.5 million valuation. Public narrative is aligned against him. He paused. Catherine, that notary log? I can't confirm it's your father's hand, but if asked, he will be asked. He was trying to be useful, I said. I know. So do prosecutors, Tom said, which is why optics matter. Keep your words narrow. On the drive to my building, the city felt cataloged. Blocks of memory and bets I'd made in neighborhoods before coffee shops arrived, before dog parks and murals and farmers markets. I had learned to buy when people rolled their eyes. I had learned to smile when meetings assumed I fetched coffee. The route home passed a corner where a bakery now sold $7 croissants. The owner waved when she saw my car, and I waved back and thought, I will not let this become my personality. I will not become a person who is only a ledger. In the lobby, the doorman looked up from his crossword. Evening, Ms. Vance. Evening, Sam. In the elevator, my face looked like my mother's when she's trying not to speak. In the penthouse, the city unrolled its light like foil. I set my keys on a table I'd sanded myself when I couldn't afford anything that didn't splinter, then opened my laptop. Tom's updates stacked like cards. The bank freeze confirmed. A notice of ethics inquiry. A demand letter draft from Johnson's counsel, crisp as pressed linen. I called Victoria. She answered quickly, like she'd been practicing. I'm sorry, she said before hello could arrive. The words sounded feral, raw at the edges. Marcus is the center of their weather system. I orbit the forecast. You're allowed to step indoors, I said. She laughed, surprised to find the sound operational. Trevor and I co-signed his office lease, she said. If the firm collapses, it is collapsing, I said. And yes, the lease will collect the rubble. We can't afford it, she said, blunt now. The kids' school, the mortgage, terminate for cause, I said. Criminal charges qualify, landlord discretion. Silence, then. How do you know? I own the building, I said. I'll draft the letter. You'll be released. Another silence. Different this time. Why would you do that after? Because you didn't forge my name, I said. Because this isn't a fire you lit. She cried, quiet, grateful, ashamed. I called you small for years, she said. I meant safe, but it came out as small. I know, I said. Words are lazy architects. Dad called an hour later. Bail is posted, he said, relief braided with ruin. He'll be home tonight. We can talk like adults without these dramatics. The DA is not theatrical, I said. They're arithmetic. The buyer's counsel is multiplication. We'll pay the $200 back, Dad said. We'll mortgage. He stopped. We both listened to the silence where possibilities used to be. There's a hearing in the morning, I said. Take a lawyer who knows criminal court, not just golf. He bristled. I have always provided for this family. I know, I said, and did not add, sometimes you provided illusions. Dad, if a notary asks about a witness signature, He inhaled sharply. I didn't read it all. He said it was routine. He said it would help with the bank. I thought... He stopped. I thought we were helping. We? I said, not unkind. Then let's help. Tell the truth. No interpretations. He didn't promise. He didn't hang up. You were always so quiet, he said finally, like a confession. I thought that meant you agreed. It meant I was thinking, I said. Different verb. Around midnight, the bail confirmation hit Tom's inbox. Marcus was out pending arraignment. Victoria texted that Mom had set a plate at the table no one would use, the way she does when she wants ritual to hold up a failing bridge. I stood at the window and watched a late truck unload kegs 2 blocks over, the clatter brief and bright. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring out, then listened to the voicemail. Johnson Properties Counsel, clipped and courteous, inviting productive dialogue while reminding me that public interest is high and time is short. I poured water. I thought about mercy and its counterfeits. Mercy is not writing checks to erase lessons. Mercy is the door you leave unlocked after the sentence is served. Tomorrow there would be forms and hearings, statements and edits. Tonight there was only the city and the quiet and a truth that did not require witnesses. I had spent years building something visible only from certain elevations. My family had never climbed those stairs. Tom's last message of the night was a single line. By the way, Quick Close's principal wants to meet. He's terrified enough to be useful. I wrote back, good. Fear can learn. Then I turned off the lights and let the skyline keep watch. The streets below flickered with people who had no idea they were walking through the perimeter of a lesson. I hoped for once my family would learn it without burning everything down to ash. Marcus's arraignment was set for the next morning, but the aftershocks began long before dawn. He didn't call me. He called Dad, of course. When I arrived at the courthouse, Dad was already in the hallway, pacing with his tie loosened and his jaw set. Mom sat beside him, gripping a handbag she hadn't used in 10 years, the one she always took to funerals, as though grief could be anticipated with accessories. Victoria and Trevor came too, dressed in clothes that suggested business meeting more than courtroom, pressed, anxious, overcompensating. When Marcus walked in wearing last night's clothes and a bail wristband, the whole hallway seemed to lurch around him. He still had that practiced smirk, but it kept slipping like a poorly fitted mask. Don't worry, he muttered to Dad. It's all procedural. They'll see this for what it is. And what is it? I asked quietly from behind him. He flinched before turning. A misunderstanding. Business moves fast, Catherine. You don't always have time to clear every line with the law, I said, or with the truth? His jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Inside, the judge read the charges with clinical precision. Fraud, forgery, grand theft. Marcus kept his eyes forward, refusing to look at the rows where we sat. When bail conditions were reiterated, restricted travel, surrender of passport, weekly check-ins, he nodded too fast, like a student pretending he'd understood the lecture. Afterward, the family gathered in the corridor like a broken procession. Mom whispered, "This isn't him. He's not a criminal." "Intent doesn't erase action," I said. She pressed her lips together until her face looked carved. "You always see the worst in him." "No," I said softly. "I see the pattern." That night, I met with Tom in his office. Papers covered his desk in neat stacks, like tectonic plates carefully aligned. He pushed one toward me, a creditor list. His firm owes $340,000 across vendors, contractors, suppliers. It's death by 1,000 invoices. The $200K deposit was survival money, not growth capital. He was already insolvent. I skimmed the pages. Printing services, janitorial, IT support, all unpaid. Marcus had bought mahogany desks and designer light fixtures, but stiffed the people who made the office run. It was always his pattern. Polish first, substance later. Tom leaned back. The title company is panicking. They'll fold if this sticks, and their lawyers know it. Johnson Properties will go nuclear, public trial, exemplary damages. National press is already circling. And the Bar Association? They've suspended him pending full investigation. I rubbed my temples. He won't practice again. No, Tom said. Not even if he escapes conviction. Reputation is currency, and his account is empty. I stood at the window of Tom's office, looking down at the city. The streets were arteries of light, and in them I could see the outlines of every building I'd ever bought. The corners, the stairwells, the roofs where tenants grilled in summer. Each one a quiet rebellion against being underestimated. Each one proof that invisibility could be armor. Tom broke the silence. I need to ask, do you want me to explore settlement? Use your assets to cushion the damage? I turned. No. Even partial restitution could sway the DA toward leniency. No, I repeated. If I erase his consequences, he learns nothing. He already believes the world will cushion his falls. I won't be another mattress. Tom studied me for a moment. Then you need to prepare yourself. This will be ugly. I've lived with ugly, I said. It doesn't scare me anymore. A week later, at family dinner, the house felt radioactive. Dad avoided my gaze. Mom moved in silence. And Marcus wasn't there. Victoria tried to fill the void with chatter about the children's school, but every sentence wavered and collapsed. Finally, Trevor set his fork down. We need to talk about the lease. Dad looked up sharply. Lease? The office space, Trevor said carefully. Victoria and I co-signed. If Marcus defaults, and he will, the landlord comes after us. I sipped water. The landlord won't. Dad frowned. And why not? Because I am the landlord, I said. The room froze. Trevor blinked. You own that building? Yes. Victoria's eyes widened with something between awe and shame. Dad's mouth tightened as though words had betrayed him. Mom whispered, How long? 4 years, I said. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Trevor exhaled, relief breaking across his face. So, we're safe? I'll terminate the lease for cause, I said. Marcus's criminal charges qualify. You won't be liable. Victoria's hand touched mine under the table. Why would you do that after everything? Because you didn't steal from me, I said, and because you'll have enough problems being married to a man branded a fraud sister. You don't need financial ruin, too. Her eyes filled, and for the first time in years, I saw her gratitude without competition. Later that night, Dad cornered me in the driveway. The porch light carved shadows across his face, making him look older than I'd ever allowed him to be. You didn't need to humiliate him, he said. I didn't humiliate him, I replied. He did that to himself. You could have stopped this. One word from you, and the DA would ease off. One word from him, years ago, and he could have chosen differently. He had choices, Dad. I'm not erasing them now. His voice cracked, a sound I'd never heard. He's my son. And I'm your daughter, I said quietly, but that never seemed to matter when he needed saving. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his authority. Then he turned away, muttering something about family, about loyalty. Days bled into weeks. The national media picked up the story. Midwest property fraud, fallen young attorney. Photos of Marcus in expensive suits plastered headlines, while my name appeared, only in passing, as the victim. My phone lit up with messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. Every one of them danced around the same question. Was I really worth millions? I didn't answer. But one night, as I closed the curtains in my penthouse, I thought about Marcus in a rented apartment somewhere, stripped of luxury, waiting for hearings. I pictured him without the armor of scotch and tailored suits, just a man who had built his castle on sand. For the first time, I felt something close to pity. Not enough to save him, but enough to recognize him as human. Weeks later, Tom called with an update. Johnson Properties is filing civil suit for full restitution, $8.5 million plus damages. The title company is preparing bankruptcy filings, and the DA is offering a deal. What kind of deal? I asked. 5 years probation, full restitution, permanent disbarment, or trial, with a very real risk of prison time. I let the words settle. And Marcus? He'll take the deal, Tom said. He has no leverage, no money, no allies. I closed my eyes. For years I had been invisible to my family. Now my silence was the only sound they couldn't ignore. The ledger was balancing itself, line by line. The plea hearing was scheduled on a rain-slick Monday, the kind of morning when the courthouse steps looked like they'd been polished for tragedy. I arrived early, not because I wanted to, but because I had learned that showing up first is often the only way to control the frame. Marcus entered, flanked by Dad and a criminal defense attorney I didn't recognize. His suit didn't quite fit, borrowed probably, and his shoes carried the dull scuff of panic. He glanced at me once, then looked away, as though meeting my eyes might write his guilt in ink. The DA read the terms of the deal. 5 years probation, full restitution of $8.5 million, permanent disbarment. If rejected, trial would proceed and prison time was almost certain. When the judge asked if he understood, Marcus's voice broke on the word yes. Dad leaned forward, whispering fiercely in his ear. Mom, seated behind us, clutched her rosary so tightly that beads scattered onto the tile. Victoria dabbed at tears she didn't want to smudge her mascara. I kept my arms folded. I had learned that posture could be armor. Afterward, in the corridor, Dad rounded on me. "This is your fault," he hissed. "You could have stopped this. One phone call, one check written. He wouldn't have to stand there humiliated." I stared at him, the hallway buzzing with other families, other lives colliding. "He forged my signature, Dad. He sold what wasn't his. He siphoned years of work because he believed I was insignificant enough not to notice. And you call that humiliation? He's your brother, and I'm your daughter," I said, letting the words land. "But that's never been the currency in this family, has it? It's always been about who shines brightest under the chandelier." For once, Dad had no retort. He pressed his lips together and looked away. That night he called. I almost didn't pick up, but habit is a stubborn thing. His voice was brittle. "As your father, I'm begging you, pay the restitution. Help him. You have the money. One wire transfer and this whole nightmare goes away." I sat in my penthouse living room, the city glittering beyond the glass, and let the silence stretch until it hurt. "You want me to cover $8.5 million for the brother who betrayed me, for the son you raised above me every single day of my life, and for you, who signed a document you didn't read because Marcus told you it would help." The phone was silent for 3 beats, then Dad exhaled sharply. "So Tom told you." "I saw the log myself," I said. "Your name in the witness column. You didn't forge it, but you enabled it. You gave him the illusion of legitimacy." "I didn't know what I was signing." "You didn't care," I cut in. "Because in your world, Marcus's convenience was more urgent than my ownership. That's how this happened. Not just because he lied, but because you all believed I had nothing to lose." Dad's voice cracked. "Please, he'll go to prison if you don't." "He won't," I said flatly. "The DA's deal spares him that, but he'll live with the cost. That's what he earned." "Catherine," Dad said softly, almost broken, "where's your mercy?" I closed my eyes, listening to the faint hum of the city below. Mercy is not erasing consequences. Mercy is letting him survive them. Then I hung up. At the restitution hearing, the math was laid out with cruel clarity. Johnson Properties demanded immediate repayment, or they'd push for prison time despite the plea agreement. The judge, perhaps weary of theatrics, set terms: $8.5 million restitution, payable at $20,500 per month. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Reporters scribbled. Mom sobbed quietly, pressing her rosary to her lips as though prayer could rewrite arithmetic. Marcus's attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, murmuring something about compliance and hope. I did the calculation in my head. At $2,500 a month, it would take 284 years. When the judge adjourned, Marcus sagged in his chair, pale and sweat-soaked. He looked less like a lawyer and more like a man who had just realized gravity applied to him too. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones angled, cameras clicked. "Ms. Vance," one called, "do you feel vindicated?" I stopped on the steps, the rain misting my hair, and looked into the blur of lenses. "This isn't about vindication," I said. "It's about accountability. My brother made choices. Today the law responded. That's all." Then I walked past them. Weeks passed. Marcus moved into a one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a landlord who didn't care what degree hung on the wall. He found work as a junior property manager, the kind of entry-level job I'd done a decade earlier. His salary was $42,000 a year. Mom called me when she heard. Her voice was sharp with bitterness. "Are you happy now? Your brother's reduced to clerical work. He's overqualified, humiliated, struggling." I kept my tone even. "I worked that exact job. For years. You all ignored me then. Why is it tragic now?" "That was different." "How?" I asked. She didn't answer. Victoria reached out too. She invited me to lunch at a downtown cafe, 2 blocks from a building I owned. She didn't mention the proximity. We sat across from each other, the air filled with the hiss of espresso machines and the hum of conversation. "Marcus is different," she said carefully. "Humble, even. He's learning. He asks about you sometimes." I stirred my coffee. "Does he?" "He wonders if you'll ever forgive him." "I don't know." Victoria studied me, then sighed. "You know what's strange? I always thought you were the one who needed guidance, that Marcus was the model. Turns out you were the only one who figured it out." I looked at her, surprised by the candor. Did I figure it out? Or did Marcus just prove you all wrong? She smiled sadly. Both, maybe. For the first time in years, we talked like sisters, not rivals, about her children, her marriage, her small fears that had nothing to do with status or money. She never asked about my portfolio, just me. It was the best conversation we'd ever had. But shadows lingered. Late one night, Tom called. I've confirmed it. Your father didn't just witness one form. There are others. Old refinancing documents, signatures placed too quickly, always to smooth Marcus's path. Not criminal, not yet, but it's a pattern. If Johnson Properties digs deeper, optics could get messy. I sat in my penthouse, city lights stretching like constellations across the dark. So Dad wasn't just blind, he was complicit. To protect Marcus, Tom said, always Marcus. I thought of Dad's voice on the phone, begging for mercy. I thought of Mom's rosary beads clutched like a shield. And I realized the family myth wasn't just about Marcus's brilliance, it was about their fear of what he might be without it. The cost of that myth had finally come due. 6 months after the restitution order, the noise had faded. Reporters had moved on to fresher scandals, and the Johnson Properties suit ground through civil court like a machine chewing metal. But the silence inside our family was louder than any headline. Mom still called weekly, her voice alternating between brittle cheer and raw blame. Sometimes she asked if I was eating, as though feeding me through the phone could prove she still had influence. Other times she demanded to know why I couldn't simply make this disappear. Dad rarely spoke at all. When he did, it was clipped, transactional, the tone of a man nursing wounds too deep to show. Marcus, meanwhile, was working. Not law, never law again. He had taken a job at a modest property management firm where he answered maintenance calls and tracked lease renewals. His title was assistant, a demotion written into every email signature. Yet for the first time, he showed up. Colleagues told me he was punctual, quiet, even deferential. The arrogance that once filled a room like smoke was gone. In its place was something leaner, more human. I didn't see him, but I heard about him, through Victoria. One afternoon, she invited me again for coffee. We met at a small cafe tucked between a thrift store and a laundromat, hardly the gleaming spaces she used to prefer. She arrived in jeans, hair pulled back, no performance in her posture. He's trying, she said simply after we sat down. Marcus, he actually listens now. He doesn't talk over everyone. He stays late to file reports. He calls tenants back himself. Basic decency, I said. Funny how it becomes heroic when someone finally learns it. She winced but didn't disagree. He's different. And he asks about you. Not for money, not for rescue, just asks if you're well. I looked out the window where a delivery truck was unloading crates of vegetables. I'm well. Victoria leaned forward. He knows he can't undo it. He told me that. But he said something that surprised me. I didn't just steal from her. I stole from her belief that family could be safe. The words caught me off guard, enough that I had to grip my cup tighter. Did he mean it? I think so, she said. He's not asking for forgiveness. He knows it's not his to demand, but he wants you to know he sees it now. We sat in silence a while, sipping coffee, the weight between us lighter than it had ever been. That evening, back in my penthouse, I walked from window to window, the city stretched beneath me like an intricate puzzle I had spent years assembling. Each building had a story. The bakery where the owner cried when I gave her a favorable lease, the corner office space that survived 3 recessions, the apartment complex where tenants still sent me Christmas cards. For years, I'd built this life as a shield, proof that I mattered, even when my family treated me like background noise. Now the portfolio felt less like armor and more like architecture, something that stood whether or not anyone noticed. I thought of Marcus in his 1-bedroom apartment, sorting rent checks, reminding tenants about trash pickup. It was the kind of invisible work he once sneered at. Now it was all he had. I wondered if humility was the only kind of wealth that had ever been missing from his life. A month later, Victoria invited me to dinner at her house. Trevor grilled salmon on the patio while the kids raced around the yard. Victoria poured me wine and leaned against the counter, watching them through the window. You know, she said, I used to think success was measured in how loud your life looked. Cars, houses, parties. Marcus embodied that. But now, watching him rebuild from nothing, I think maybe you had it right all along. I smiled faintly. I didn't build quietly because I was wise. I built quietly because no one believed me when I spoke. Silence was all I had left. Victoria's eyes softened, but silence became your strength. Maybe it had, or maybe it had just been camouflage until the day truth was too large to ignore. That night, after I got home, I found an envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note in Marcus's unmistakable scrawl. Catherine, I don't deserve to say much, but I want you to know I'm learning. I'm learning how to show up when no one applauds, how to work when no one notices. You did it for years, and I mocked you for it. I see now you were building something real while I was building a stage set. I'm not asking for a response. Just thank you for forcing me to see the truth, even if it broke me. M. I sat on the couch holding the note for a long time. My chest felt heavy, but not with anger, with something closer to release. Weeks passed. I met with Tom again to review the civil suit filings. Johnson Properties pushed for damages, the title company teetered on bankruptcy, and Marcus's financial ruin deepened. Yet, strangely, I no longer felt the urge to monitor every line item. The law would handle the math. My job was to live. Later that evening, I hosted Victoria and Trevor in my penthouse. Trevor stood at the window, staring at the skyline. 17 buildings, he murmured, and we never knew. You weren't supposed to, I said. Why? Because if you had known, you would have measured me differently, and I wanted to see how you measured me without the ledger. Trevor turned to me, his expression thoughtful. Then maybe that's why you're the only one in this family who figured out how to build something that lasts. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We see it now. We see you. And for once, I believed her. That night, alone again, I stood on the balcony with the city breathing below. The air smelled faintly of rain and gasoline, the scent of a place still alive, still unfinished. My family was fractured, yes, but for the first time, it felt like cracks that might let light in instead of splitting us apart entirely. Marcus was working. Victoria was changing. Dad's silence had grown heavier, but even silence can be the beginning of reflection. I didn't need their apologies anymore. What I needed was the truth, that I had built something that could not be stolen 2 years past. The scandal that once scorched headlines now lived only in legal archives and the corners of the internet. New crises had replaced ours in the public imagination. But inside the family, the damage had left grooves too deep to smooth. Dad aged quickly. His hair whitened, his voice thinned, and the certainty that once animated every dinner table decree had dulled. I visited once, out of obligation rather than longing. He sat in his recliner, remote in hand, but the television was off. The man who once demanded the world bend around his opinion now stared at blank screens. He gestured for me to sit. His hand shook when he reached for the glass of water on the side table. Catherine, he said, my name small in his mouth. I should tell you something. I waited. Silence had always been our family's truest language. I signed more than once, he whispered. Marcus asked me. He said it was routine. I wanted to believe him. I didn't read. I thought I was helping. I thought if I just cleared the path, he'd finally succeed. His eyes clouded. I failed him. I failed you. For years, I had imagined this moment with fire, anger, accusation, proof. Instead, I only felt tired. You didn't fail by signing papers, I said. You failed by assuming he mattered more than I did. You failed by thinking silence meant weakness. Dad's lips trembled. I was afraid that if Marcus fell, the whole family would unravel. He was the pillar, or I thought he was. He wasn't the pillar, I said. He was the weight. You just didn't notice who was holding the beam. He nodded slowly, tears gathering, but not falling. I see that now. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was truth, and that was all I needed from him. Marcus never asked me for help again. He didn't call, didn't write, except for one letter that arrived a year after his conviction. The handwriting was steadier than before. Catherine, I'm leading a training session for new property managers next week, teaching them how to spot undervalued neighborhoods, how to handle difficult tenants, how to build trust. I realized everything I'm teaching, I learned by watching you. You spoke about these things years ago, and I ignored you. I thought you were boring. Turns out, you were the only one in the room worth listening to. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I just want you to know I see it now. I see you, Marcus. I read it twice, then tucked it in a drawer. Not to treasure, not to discard, just to acknowledge. Victoria remained a constant presence. She came often, sometimes with the children, sometimes alone. We'd sit in my living room with wine glasses balanced on the coffee table and talk, not of money or status, but of marriages, regrets, small victories. She no longer compared, no longer competed. She simply shared. One evening, she brought a box of old photographs, family holidays, birthdays, vacations. In every picture, Marcus beamed at the center, Dad's hand on his shoulder. In the corners, blurred or half-lit, I appeared, holding a tray, tidying a space, smiling just enough not to be asked questions. "I used to think you wanted it that way," Victoria said softly, flipping through the images, "that you liked the background." "I didn't want invisibility," I said. "I wanted room to breathe." She touched my hand. "You have it now, and I see you clearly." Sometimes at night, I walked through the city, tracing the outlines of my buildings. A bakery glowing warm at midnight, an office tower lit with blue security lights, an apartment window where a child's laughter spilled onto the street. Each one was more than a number. They were living ledgers, proof that my work had shape, sound, texture. No one in my family had ever asked about the tenants, the lives inside the walls. They measured worth by headlines and degrees, by cars and clubs, but my wealth had always been human, even when I hid it under silence. On the second anniversary of Marcus's sentencing, I received another letter, shorter this time. "I know I will never repay the restitution, not in this lifetime, but I repay it in other ways, by showing up, by working honestly, by admitting what I don't know. Maybe that's worth something. I hope you're well, that's all. M." I didn't reply, but I folded the letter neatly and slid it next to the first. Not because I believed in redemption on command, but because even a ledger carries room for annotations. One evening, as the sun sank over the skyline, I stood on my penthouse balcony. The city stretched before me, each building a page, each light a line item. For so long, my life had been defined by the need to prove I was not invisible, to prove I could build something no one could take. Now at last, I no longer needed proof. Marcus was rebuilding, slowly, painfully, in the quiet spaces where applause never reached. Victoria had shed the armor of comparison and found her own gentler strength. Dad, diminished, had finally admitted his blindness. Mom still clung to prayers and denial, but even she had stopped asking me to erase consequences with money. The ledger was balanced, not in numbers. The restitution would never be paid in full, but in truth. What was stolen had been acknowledged. What was hidden had been revealed, and what was overlooked had finally been seen. I leaned against the railing, watching the city breathe, and let the silence settle around me like a cloak. For once, it wasn't camouflage, it was peace. That my life was not defined by their blindness. And as the wind lifted strands of my hair, I realized something else. I wasn't waiting for reconciliation. If it came, it would be a gift. If it didn't, I had already survived.